So let's get rolling. So grateful to have all of you here. Again, if you can, would love to see you turn on your video and show your smiling face. If you're not smiling, we'll think that you don't like us for some reason, and we'll just kind of get sad and confused about that. So we wouldn't want any of that. But welcome. So excited to be here with my esteemed friend and colleague and collaborator, Pat Sweet. My name is Jeff Perry. I'm located in beautiful Pullman, Washington. Pat is far away from me in Nova Scotia,
Yeah,
Canada.
part way into the Atlantic Ocean, so we've got
Yeah,
we've got the whole continent covered.
yeah. So we've got certainly coast to coast here, and curious to know where all of you are. We'll get to that in a second, but so grateful to be here. We're going to be talking about engineering leadership. No matter whether or not you have a formal title or a management role currently, we're excited to have you here. So I'm going to go ahead and get everything set up to present. Then we can get rolling for real. But we're going to build in some opportunities for you to engage here, and we want to get to know you better as we move through this process. Okay, so I'm going to share a screen, and hopefully this works. Pat and others, can you give me a thumbs up that this is working here? All right, Henry's got a thumbs up, so let's get rolling. So just to start us off, I want to do something called a quick chat. And what this is just an opportunity for us to engage a little bit more in this webinar format. We'll ask a question, but we don't want you to actually press enter. So we want you to type your answer in the chat box, but don't press enter until we do a countdown, a 3, 2, 1. And so then when we do that countdown, then everyone's responses will come in simultaneously. Okay, so we're going to test this out and get to know where all of you are from. And so the question here is, where are you joining us from today? So again, just type your answer in the chat box. Make sure it gets sent to everyone in the meeting. And then we'll do a countdown here in just a moment, and we'll see all the answers come rushing in. All right.
This is designed to build anticipation.
Yeah, I know.
We're in for an
The suspense
exciting
is
webinar.
killing me just like it's killing you. All right. So let's go 3, 2, 1, enter. Oh man, everywhere. Few Halifaxes.
See, now I've got to
and
scan
friends with
through Calgary, Atlanta,
yeah,
San Antonio. Holy cow, this is great.
yeah. Sunnyvale, Atlanta. Very good.
I've
People
got
all over. Southern California, New Jersey.
someone in from Lebanon as well. Welcome. What time is it in Lebanon at the
Right.
moment?
I am curious, Salah. What time is it in Lebanon? That's our you win the you win
Oh
the
my
oh
word.
Noor. Okay. You win the award for
De-
furthest away and most dedicated to
de-
engineering leadership.
dedication and commitment to excellence
Yeah,
for Noor
absolutely.
already.
So we're going to do these quick chats a few times today. Let's just kind of get us warmed up. So as we move along, I just want to give you a promise for what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about what leadership looks like, whether or not you directly manage others, because leadership is something that all of us can take these principles, these ideas, and use them to influence and help other people. We're going to talk about building effective teams as great leaders, talk about setting visions and help setting up other people for success. And we want you, most importantly, to come away with activities and actions that you can do now and in the short term and in the long term to improve your leadership skills right away. So we want this to be an action-oriented thing, not just theory and ideas. We want you to come away with some actionable things. Okay, and if you stick around, we've got some free stuff for you, a 90-day plan and an Engineering Leadership 101 ebook. So we'll share those things at the end. Quick intro from me, and I'll let Pat introduce himself. Jeff Perry, I have a background in mechanical engineering, spent time in software and manufacturing and process improvement. 2019, I created More Than Engineering. I serve engineers and technical professionals as a leadership and career coach, and also get to host the Engineering Career Coach podcast in partnership with the Engineering Management Institute. So that's a quick intro for me, and I'll let Pat introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Pat Sweet. I'm a professional engineer living and working in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I've got a few extra letters behind my name there as well. I'm a experienced systems engineer. I've worked in rail manufacturing and shipbuilding as well, mostly focusing on large, complex systems integration projects. So after 13 years of doing that, I recently hung a shingle and launched the Engineering Leadership Project. And that's where I host my podcast, the Engineering Leadership Podcast, and help individuals and organizations when it comes to developing engineering leadership and management skills, which is why I'm here with you and with Jeff tonight.
Excellent. So excited to be here. And as we just start diving in here, just an invitation for all of you. You're here, you've decided to grace us with your presence, but be here, right? So you may as well be as present as possible. So I invite you to be present, pay attention, engage with the content and the ideas behind them. And then look for actions, things that you can do, maybe some adjustments that you feel like you can make in your personal, professional life, something that you might think about doing differently. And then once you've identified, we invite you to take that action. So constantly be looking for that. Invite you to turn off any other distractors or social media things, put down your phone unless that's what you're using to tune in with us tonight, and really just be here so you can get the most out of this time. Okay, we're just so excited to be here with you. So as we get started here, and I'm going to turn it over to Pat here in a second, we're going to do one more quick chat just to kind of set this intention for you. Again, type in your answer, but don't press enter until we do the countdown. The question here is, why are you here? What are you hoping to get out of this presentation? What are you hoping to learn? This might help Pat and I make some adjustments here, or get some feedback and ways that we can help you or other engineers even more in the future. So would love to hear what your thoughts are. Make sure you send it to everyone in the chat box. Type in your answer. We'll give you just a few more seconds. Then we'll do a countdown in 3, 2, 1. Go ahead. Strategies, leadership stuff, practical tools, leadership tips, connecting with people, being a better leader, understand how to develop leadership.
Excellent. Looking for promotion.
Okay, I like that. Promotion from Karen. Yeah, that's good.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, I think everyone's come to the right place.
Yeah. So we hope we've got stuff for all of you. Negotiation. I don't think we're going to get into that in particular, and we're not going to talk about promotions in particular. Although we could apply many of the ideas and principles here to negotiations or promotions, and we'll have some Q&A at the end, and we can apply some of these things too if you have specific questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat to get us rolling.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. Really appreciate it. We're going to start tonight with an overview, really start at the basics and try to understand what leadership looks like. What is leadership in the first place? And this is important because even though we're all here tonight, most of us just said we wanted to learn about leadership. It's kind of thing that can be hard to wrap your arms around. It can be hard to understand in a concise, concrete way. So that's where I want to start for tonight. And I think this quote from Seth Godin. Seth Godin is he's a marketing expert, and he's an ex-VP over at Yahoo, back when Yahoo was a big deal. And I really like this quote from him. He says, "The secret to leadership is simple. Do what you believe in, paint a picture of the future, go there, people will follow." And I really like that, because this is ultimately what it boils down to, is this idea of having a belief in something, and that something being greater than yourself, sharing a vision for what that world might look like, and then actually pursuing it. And if you can do those things, and the vision is compelling, this future state is a good one, then others will follow. You just have to have the courage to do all that. And it's the doing that we're going to get into more and more tonight. So a lot of us, when we think of leadership, we think of big, gregarious, larger than life characters. We think of people like Elon Musk. And in a lot of ways, Elon is a fantastic example of a visionary leader. And I'm going to pause right now, and I would love for people to put in the chat. We won't do the 3, 2, 1 thing, but if anyone here thinks they know what Elon Musk's vision of the future is, I would love for you to type it in. And I'm willing to bet that at least a few of you have a very clear idea of what Elon is all about, and the world that he is trying to create, even though you don't work for the guy. So that's a really good example of someone who stands out as a leader. But there's a bit of a problem with Elon Musk, and that is none of us can relate to him. None of us can relate to being a billionaire and having millions of Twitter followers, and influencing stock markets with the power of a tweet. It seems, if you think of a leader as being the Elon Musk type, then it seems like it's too far removed from real life, from the day-to-day, from what you and I can actually do. It makes you think that leadership is for other people. And Nitish, transcending limits of humanity. That's a great answer, and that's exactly right. And if you look at Elon's Twitter profile right now, the header is this time phase picture of Mars transitioning into some terraformed quasi Earth, right? He wants to expand humanity. This is a big deal for him. But again, that pushes us beyond what is normal life. Okay. Luckily, leadership is a lot more accessible than that. You don't have to be an Elon Musk. And I would argue that for the most part, most leaders are not that kind of leader. Leadership looks a lot more like what you see in the picture here. It's normal people doing normal work stuff with someone standing up and helping guide the team. And if you're to walk away with anything tonight, any one message from me, what I would want you to walk away with is understanding that leadership is a skill set and a mindset that anyone can use. Anyone can develop that skill set, and anyone can develop the mindset, and it doesn't matter where you are in the org chart. You can apply leadership as a junior engineer. You really can. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll see what I mean when I say that. Not only that, leadership is needed at every level. So that's important. Not only can it be practiced at any level, it's actually needed. And you don't need 69 million Twitter followers or $300 billion in the bank to be able to do it. So I've talked a lot about why leadership is important, right? And we're all here probably because we think leadership is important, or we want leadership skills, but it'll probably help to pause for a moment and think about why. Why is it so important that we develop leadership skills, particularly if we're not managers? Isn't leadership for management types? And frankly, no, it's for everyone. It's important for managers, but I will submit to you that it's important that people in all roles be able to use leadership skills as well. And there are a couple of big reasons for that. First is it drives change. A leader paints a picture of the future and helps drive toward that better place. And that represents a change. And I'm sure no matter where you're practicing engineering, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what your job title is, I'm willing to bet that change is a major part of your life. That's just part of our world. So to be able to drive change and harness and guide it in a positive direction is super important. The next thing that makes leadership important is it provides clarity. And one of the other things that, again, I'm willing to bet no matter where you are, no matter what you do, people feel overwhelmed. They are distracted. The emails, the meetings, the requests, the tasks, they're piling up, and it's very easy to get lost in all of that. Leaders are there to help provide clarity and help you make sense of what's important and what's not. What should you focus on and what should you leave behind? Without leadership, that's very, very difficult to do at an individual level and almost important at a team or organizational level. Next, a leader motivates and inspires. The work we do is incredibly challenging. It can be drudgery at times. It's difficult. It's painful. And it's important to have someone there to remind you of why you do what you do and why it's important and how it'll make the world a better place. Having those nudges from a leader over the course of a long program is very, very important. So it's also important from an individual standpoint as well. right? Both for your own career success, right? And to make others within your sphere operate at a higher level. So both from an organizational standpoint and an individual career success standpoint, leadership is super, super important. So that's leadership at a very high level. Now, one of the things you have to understand about leadership, though, is it's not like second order differential equations, in that it's very hard to concretely define it and execute it and have that be that. It's not heuristic the way a lot of our day-to-day nuts and bolts work is. And to address that, academics and practitioners have come up with a number of different models of leadership. And we're going to present one of those models to you tonight, and that's called servant leadership. So servant leadership was a term first coined by this fellow here, Robert K. Greenleaf. And the way he explained it was this way: the servant leader is a servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. And that's a really important distinction, and it's a different way of thinking of leadership compared to what you might be used to. So what he's talking about here, and this was ultimately in response to a problem that Greenleaf saw in his own practice. So he was a manager in AT&T in the 1970s. And one of the things that he saw in his practice was that people in leadership roles were at risk. They were at risk of kind of being distracted by their own power, their own fame, and by being put in a leadership role, it happened more often than he was comfortable with that people started acting on their own behalf as opposed to their team's behalf or the organization's behalf. So he came up with this model, the servant leadership. And in this model, a leader is called to serve first. So the whole idea is that you see that there's a need on behalf of your team. And Jeff, if you don't mind advancing the slide, that would be great. You see that there's a need for someone to step in and help the team achieve something. And that choice inspires another choice, which is to lead, right? The idea is not that you find an opportunity to be head honcho, you find an opportunity to help support the team. And what's important here in servant leadership is that the leader subordinates themselves to the needs of others and to the mission of the team. So it's not about being in charge, it's about supporting and helping push ahead, both for the benefit of the others in the team and in service to the greater mission. And that's really, really important in servant leadership, is that you are there for the mission as opposed to there for your own personal benefit and glory. And Greenleaf argued that if you could wrap your head around that, and if you could approach leadership from that mindset, A, you would be a great leader, B, you avoid all the risks and bad stuff that comes along with letting power get to your head. So if we're to depict this here a little bit, this is a traditional view of leadership, with the leader at the top, with deputies under the leader, and then team members doing the bidding of the deputies and leaders. But servant leadership kind of turns that on its head. And what it does is it flips things around, where the leader is actually viewing themselves as a supporter of deputies who are supposed to be supporters of team members. And what this does is this makes leadership very effective in terms of making sure that the team has what it needs, whether it needs guidance or direction or support or someone to come up with a plan. It's the idea is that it's the team's needs that drives the actions of the leader. It also helps make leadership accessible to anyone within the org chart. Okay, and if we go to the next slide, this is what leadership looks like at the beginning of most leaders' lives, is they are working with their colleagues. You know, this team originally would have been 4 in a row on the same line. And perhaps the team was struggling with something. Maybe there's a certain expertise or certain knowledge that one teammate had. And maybe they put themselves down below to say, you know what, I'm going to help the team by doing this, by providing guidance, by motivating, by helping prop you guys up. It's not about calling the shots and fear mongering and driving people to do their work because they don't want to upset the boss. This is about someone propping others up. So this is the model of leadership that we really want Jeff and I, you guys to adopt in your own minds, because this is something anyone can do. And if you look at the characteristics of servant leaders, empowering and developing others, showing humility, being authentic, accepting people, these are things anyone can do. And really, what we're going to drive toward by the end of the evening is kind of the concrete things that you can do to practice these characteristics and develop those characteristics. And then through demonstrating them, you will establish yourself as a leader within your group. And from that position, you can do some really, really powerful things. And I'm going to highlight that last bullet there. Servant leaders are stewards who work for the good of the whole. And the idea of stewardship here, I think, is really, really important. A steward of something doesn't own it. So a leader doesn't own the team. It's not property of theirs to do with as they wish. A leader ought to consider themselves a steward. So they are given responsibility for the care of that team and the success of that team. But the team is not theirs to use. And that's a really important mental shift for some people. And I really want you to pay attention to that. So it's probably already obvious based on what I've said that there's lots to love about servant leadership as a model. First of all, it's effective, right? It's a way to lead that really does help a team achieve big things, achieve its goals. Second of all, and I've said this, it's accessible to anyone. You don't need to be an executive to be a servant leader. Anyone can serve others and demonstrate leadership through that service. So that's why one of the reasons we're promoting it tonight. And finally, it's about doing the right things for the right reasons. There's a moral, ethical component to it. This isn't leadership for your own gain. This isn't leadership because you want the power. This is leadership to help serve a mission and serve others.
Yeah, Nitish has a question there in the chat, Pat, if you want to address that real quick about like, hey, is this really like leading by example? What would you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I would say it's not one and the same, but particularly in positions where you are a peer to your teammates. You know, for example, if you're not a formal manager, if you're not a formal team lead, by setting the example in the way you act, the way you interact with others, the way you approach your work, that example can, in a sense, be of service to the rest of the team. You are showing them the way. And if you really do believe that it's the right way to be and the right way to achieve a goal, that can be thought of as a way of serving others. You know, if we look at mentorship, you know, that's a little more active in terms of, you know, not just behaving a certain way, but sharing with someone else how you behaved and the lessons you've learned. It's a little bit more of it's almost like passive mentorship, that leading by example. But I like that way of thinking about it. Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for the question. And Salah's got a comment here as well. It's like about providing support, coaching, and motivation to equals, and also I would add those that you support, even if you are a formal leader. You know, like Pat flipped the script there. Like the leader is someone underneath who's supporting. Even people, if you are formally leading a team or teams of teams, you're in that support, coaching, motivation role.
Yeah, and before we move on, I know there are a couple software engineers in the group, and for those of you who are familiar with agile management and particularly Scrum, that one of the Scrum leaders' fundamental jobs in life is to eliminate roadblocks for the team, right? This is one of the most important things that a leader in an agile environment does. It's to make sure that the team can do the work it needs to do. So I see a lot of servant leadership in that model as well. So maybe for the software folks or folks who are familiar with agile, can relate to that, can make sense of that.
Yeah. Very good. Thanks so much, Pat. So I'm going to take over here and we want to talk about one of the things that I've found, and I think Pat has found as well, as we've worked with a lot of engineering leaders and in our own work as engineering leaders and people that we've been able to work with, coach and train and different things like that. So one of the difficulties is this idea of letting go and letting go of a number of things, like some of those maybe traditional mindsets around what leadership means, but also letting go of some other things, because this is really a key piece to that idea of servant leadership, which is that purpose of building and supporting those that you're working with and leading. So we're going to look at this in a few different contexts. So here's just one more quote that I really like from John Maxwell. Leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, shows the way. Like really these different pieces there that is helping the team be successful. And if we look back at that flip script model, the servant leadership model, where this leader is underneath supporting, this idea of how do we actually build those team members and help them do their best work, be the best versions of themselves. So we understand this idea that Pat shared with us in the model of servant leadership, but what does that actually look like, and what are some of the things we need to do to make that happen? And some of the things here talk about, hey, for them to be successful as a leader, we need to set forth a clear vision. What does that look like? We'll talk about that a little bit here, and then Pat's going to talk about that even more later as well. In order for them to be successful, you need to help them build necessary skills, and those are technical skills. There are soft skills, we might say, around how they communicate and interact with the team. And with other stakeholders or clients, depending on what the work looks like. Skills around softwares or technologies they need to be familiar with and even grow significant expertise in. In order to do that, one of the things we need to do is help them have meaningful responsibility. They need to be able to take ownership of work that they do so that they can be autonomous, and that responsibility, that ownership helps them to grow. In order to do this, to build those skills and get that responsibility, a leader needs to kind of let go of some of those things, especially for technical leaders who maybe grew into this role by being a great technical expert or an SME, a subject matter expert, or just being really great at their job. Sometimes letting go of those things can be quite difficult, and we'll talk about some of those challenges there. But we'll first start with this idea of like setting the vision, and one of the ways to look at this is that leaders in setting the vision need to go down to that level of purpose. Why are we doing this? What is important about the work that we're doing? And I think about all the way from the very top of if the organization or the corporation or wherever you're working at has a vision statement or a mission statement or things that ways that they have described that they want to change the world or do different things. How does that come all the way down to the team and what their role is and the why they exist as part of the larger vision, and even down to the individual? Why do they have this role, and why is what they do important to the success of the team and the success of the organization as a whole? People can understand that deeper level of purpose and connection to the bigger picture really helps them with their level of motivation. A leader can also communicate the what needs to be done. So we're setting strategic roadmaps, we're setting forth goals and actions that we want to take. Helping create these metrics and definitions of success so people know what they're shooting for and can see the progress along the way. But then the letting go piece is some of the how. We need to let go of some of the how to make that happen. Leave that to the team. Let them use their expertise. Let them build and grow and develop. That doesn't mean that you won't sometimes be giving some feedback on how they can improve later, or as they move through that process, and just 100% fully trust and never look at it again. but it is allowing people to use their autonomy and their skills to deliver the great work that you expect of them, right? So this looks like delegating. We talk about a lot with that, and some of the leaders that I've coached and trained, this is one of the most difficult things for them to do, is to delegate and let go of some of the responsibilities because they're afraid of quality or other things diminishing. Giving and sharing that responsibility. So sometimes you can just give someone that responsibility. Sometimes it needs to be shared for a time as people sort of grow, and we're mentoring, helping them build those skills, that responsibility. But looking at this delegation, this opportunity as an investment in the person. Okay. And yes, there's going to be some time it takes from you and maybe other people on the team to help train them, give them these skills, and take that time. But this is how people learn. This is how people grow. They need to have those challenges that are helping them push and reach further beyond what their current responsibilities are. But it's hard, right? And so I like this visual of the anchor kind of holding us back. Like, even if we intellectually know that this is important, this is something that we should do, there are many reasons or thinking patterns or mindsets that might be actually holding us back from truly letting go. And these are just a few. Like, hey, maybe you are the expert on a certain topic or a software or a process, or maybe it's kind of your baby. You're the one who started this from the beginning, and now you have to let that go and give that responsibility to someone else. That's really hard, because suddenly things are going to change, or it's going to screw up, and then it might come back on you. I mean, all sorts of things we could think might happen. Recognizing it does take that time to train and develop, help give that responsibility, set them up for success. Because the last thing we want to do is say, hey, I want you to do this, like, go do it, and not and just set them up for failure. That's not helpful either. So it does take that time to build those traits and those skills in the people so that they can truly take on that responsibility and we can truly let go and trust them. Leaders might be afraid of quality issues if we hand different pieces off or share responsibility. And again, this doesn't necessarily mean if you are only a leader of a team delegating responsibility. Maybe you're an expert in a traditionally horizontal team and you've been owning one particular process, but now you're sharing some of this responsibility with other people. You may have some of these same things, but that's still building those skills in other parts of the team, right? Afraid it'll take longer. I hear this all the time. It's faster if I just do this than if I try and train someone else to do it. Yeah, it probably is in the short term, but in the long term, you might be causing even more problems. And also this idea of like, hey, I want to be right, or I want to get credit for this work. And if I give that to someone else, then they might get credit. And this ownership, and that could go both ways, no matter what your title is. And so I'm curious, go ahead, Pat.
Oh, I was just going to say there are a couple comments in the chat that have leaned really heavily into the challenge of your own ego as a leader, and I think in a lot of ways that sums up a lot of what we're talking about here in the challenge of letting go and giving credit where you're used to getting it, and coming up with a solution where that was your job, that was your existence up until this point. Letting others do that is very difficult. But yeah, it comes down to management of your own ego ultimately, which is a tough thing to hear, a tough thing to confront. But super important to set it aside. And as you've said, yeah.
Yeah, and Suresh had some good thoughts there. Thanks for sharing that, Suresh, and Hendry, your comments earlier as well. So I'm curious for you. I want to do another one of these quick chats and hear for you, like, what is your biggest challenge with letting go? Whether or not you are a formal leader, like what are these things that are kind of holding you back? Whether it's a belief or mindset or fear that you're afraid of, like what is it that makes it hard for you to let go? Share responsibility, delegate, and do some of these things. So throw your answer into the chat window. Give you a few more seconds here, and then we'll do a countdown. I'd love to see what people share here. And you might find that many of the people share some similarities with your own challenges, and that's it's always nice to feel like we're not the only ones, right? So let's do a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and press enter and share with us. Okay. Sometimes there's no one to train or share that responsibility. Yeah, that fear of quality, having things done right, getting them done, perfectionism, things go slower, afraid of the quality of work other people do, finding the right person can be a difficulty. Fear that the team might fail, and that would be, so sometimes it's a protecting other people that we don't want to give them that, and then they might fail. So that's an interesting thing that might be holding us back. So any other thoughts on there before we that people have? Go ahead and keep sharing them in the chat. Did you have a couple thoughts there, Pat?
Just that, you were right in guessing that there was some common themes would come up. Quality of work, speed of work, are the two big ones. And this is the same thing that I feel and have felt in my own career. And the issue is that those concerns generally relate to the work done today at the expense of how the team might be equipped to handle work tomorrow, right? If you get comfortable with little bad things happening and treat those as part of a feedback loop, eventually the team will get it. And you got to remember your team, you're probably leading engineers. You're leading bright, high achieving people who want to do good work. But it's very, very difficult to take that leap. And it does take a degree of faith, and it does take a bit of a stomach for letting little bad things happen. But if you treat that as part of an overall process that goes beyond this task, right? It gets much easier to wrap your head around having those little bad things happen.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. And Hendry shared there in the chat, like failure is actually a good thing. Like fire, it clears the way for new growth. And you gave that like longer term perspective, Pat, that the fear that's often trying to keep us from that failure or prevent against failure is often that short term thinking. And even though we can recognize and we can state like, yeah, failure is a good thing, it helps us learn and grow, and we can recognize that intellectually, that doesn't mean that those fears aren't still going to creep in for us. They happen all the time. And I still get held back by fear of personal failure or giving or setting someone else up for failure all the time. It's still a fear of mine, and I have to be aware of that over and over and over again as we move through that. So again, there's just this idea of like leaders have this opportunity when we look at it this way to really give that ownership, give that responsibility. And in the end, typically like leaders owning and having that responsibility and owning their team's work. So yeah, the team's work is eventually going to probably reflect on the leader. We want to give, as leaders, we want to take ownership for anything. I mean, one way to look at it is take ownership for anything bad that happens and give credit to the team when anything good happens, right? Because you want people to feel, but the buck stops with the responsibility in the end. And so, but we want to build that ownership and that responsibility and that mindset in our own team members, allow them to own it and take that responsibility. And that means, like we just talked about, they might fail, but then we have that opportunity to continue to support, build, teach them, but don't take back that responsibility. I love, if any of you have read or familiar with the work of Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits, one of the stories is just this idea of him talking to one of his sons and giving him the responsibility. He said, hey, we've got a lot to do around the house. We need to divvy up some of the responsibilities to manage the family household. Okay, so one of the sons takes the responsibility for taking care of the lawn. And he says, well, this is how I would do it. I would, but he sets forth the vision of it. So we talked about that at the beginning. And he says, green and clean. Green and clean. This is the goal. And he shows what it looks like. He shows the neighbor's lawn, which is pristine and green and well cut. There's not stuff all over the place. And they look at their own lawn at the current state, and there's toys and tools and all sorts of stuff all over, and it's starting to die or get overgrown in some places. And it's like, that's not what we're looking for. Look over there, green and clean. That's what we're looking for. And so talk about how to do this, how to mow the lawn, and I would set up the sprinkler system, but you can do it however you want. You can hand water, like you can take care of the how and own that responsibility. But he really wanted his son to own this. So a week, two goes by, and his son hasn't really done anything, and he's getting frustrated. He's like, we've set that up, and he says, and he took that servant leadership responsibility. It's like, who's your helper? You are, Dad. Is like, that's right. I'm the helper. I'm here to help you, but you're in charge, right? If I have that time. So anyway, a couple weeks goes by, nothing has happened. The son hasn't taken any action, and the lawn's getting drier and drier as time goes on. And Dr. Covey in the end just like can't handle like. And his son is, instead of taking care of his responsibility, is playing with his friends across the street. And he says, "Son, what is going on? Have you done anything about this?" And in that moment, he recognized that he'd kind of broken that commitment of trust that they had, and started to take over again. And that's one of the most damaging things that can happen when we're trying to build and let go and build these relationships with those that we lead, is to give them that and don't take that responsibility back. If something needs to be adjusted, we can ask how we can support. And he recognized he could have asked a question rather than an accusation to help his son. And they had to have some more conversations. In the end, his son was feeling overwhelmed by the responsibility and needed some more support and guidance, and was able to get there. So there's just one kind of fun family responsibility, and you can go look up that story in an article or a video if you want to go, or in the book 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. One more final thing as we end off this section is, especially for those who are maybe individual contributors, not in a formal leadership title, look at this the other way. Like, you may have opportunities to take that ownership and ask for that responsibility from your leaders, and help your leader let go, which will then help you grow and help the team be more successful if you can identify. So I love this idea of like, see a need, fill a need. You can ask for more responsibility if you have that bandwidth. A new challenge. And make it easy for the leader to let go of those things that they shouldn't be, they perhaps shouldn't be owning, or you can at least have that conversation with them. And then if they give that to you, truly take that ownership. Now, it's okay to ask for help and guidance when you need it, but you need to believe that the buck stops at you to be successful through this. So it's just another way to take on and build those leadership skills for you, even if you're not in a leadership capacity right now.
The other thing I would offer, Jeff, is if you are an individual contributor, letting go is still super, super important. Even if only to establish a certain culture within the team, right? One example that comes to mind right away is letting go of being right. Yeah. We are super proud of our work. We're analytical. We come to a conclusion. We decide this is right. This is it. And then you get thrown into a design review where someone disagrees, or you get confronted with an alternate idea. If you can let go of being right and embrace what is best for the design or the team or whatever, that's really, really important. And what that does is that shows the team that it's okay not to win a design. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay and good to get a second opinion. And yeah, maybe you're not in a leadership role right now, and that's okay. This is a way you can show others what right looks like. And that working as a team, as a cohesive whole is the way to go. So yeah, letting go and being careful not to let your ego run the show applies no matter where you are in the org chart or what your job title is.
Yeah, well said. So with that, over back to you, Pat, as we kind of bring it home.
Perfect. So what I want to do now with this last segment of the webinar is leave you guys with um, some actionable ideas, some things that you can go do in order to bolster your abilities as a leader. Now, so far we've talked about servant leadership and use that as a model for leadership to kind of think about how to frame what a leader should be, how they should act, what they should do. Jeff talked about letting go as a way to build the team, which is important whether you're a manager or not. This next section is going to be about developing yourself as a leader in general. This is like strength training, leadership style. So we'll move ahead, and hopefully at least one of these, if not a few, will tickle your fancy. So the first thing I want to cover here is the question of who can lead. And I want you to understand, and I mentioned this off the top, you can. I don't know what you do. I don't know where you work. I don't know whether you have direct reports, whether you're a junior engineer or the CTO of something. It doesn't matter. You can learn and apply the skill set and mindset for leadership. So that's super, super important to understand that. Leadership isn't a position. It's not something that, I suppose it could be put on a business card, but it doesn't have to be. It's something you go and do. And what I'm hoping to be able to show you with these next slides is there are a few things that any of you can go do starting right now. Okay, so let's move on, and we'll cover some of these ideas. So there are six different things, ideas that I wanted to share in terms of developing your leadership skills. And we'll go through one at a time. And the first I wanted to cover is finding your why. Next, we'll talk about developing a vision, sharpening the saw, which is kind of improving yourself, making connections with your team, working with coaches or mentors, and then looking for opportunities to lead. And we'll jump through these pretty quickly. So the first one is finding your why, and here I've got a picture that I put together. This is my desktop background for a number of years, and what this does is this summarizes for me why I do what I do. All right, in one picture, I'm reminded of all sorts of things that are really important to me and what I value. So that's my daughter playing in Lake Ontario. On the left, I come to work and I do what I do because I want to provide for my family. I want to help create a wonderful future for my daughter. And engineers are critical to that, right? And the practice of engineering is critical. And my work now to help create engineering leaders facilitates all of that to an even greater degree, which is why I'm so excited about this new challenge that I've taken on. In the middle two pictures, one is a library. I do what I do because I love to learn, and I think it's fundamentally good to expand horizons and grow intellectually. Below that is a picture of Citadel Hill, and that's a landmark in my home of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And it's when I developed this, I was working in the defense industry, helping the Canadian Navy. So this was an important reminder that my work was serving my country, and my home and my way of life, and that was motivating as well. And on the right, yes, I do love soccer, but that's not why I put that there. You'll notice some of the foosball players are flipped the wrong way. Some of the red players in the back are actually flipped upwards. And no matter what they do, they're not going to be able to touch the ball. That's there to remind me that leaders can help put players in place so that they can do what they do. There's nothing wrong with those players. They are perfectly capable of playing the game. They just need to be reoriented and given guidance and direction. So that was a good way to remind me why it is I do what I do. So what I'm recommending here is you get clear on your why. What do you believe is fundamentally good? What things are just in your heart of hearts true? What do you think is important? What do you think is worthy? Who would you serve, right? Given the choice and all the time in the world, getting really clear, and I like putting this into pictures because it makes it really easy to remind you of this. But if you get clear on your why, whether or not you lead a team, this is the kind of thing that when you get clear on why you do what you do, it's infectious, right? And it can help nudge people into thinking about why they do what they do. And chances are within a work group, a lot of the things that motivate you fundamentally are going to be shared in common. And this is something that can really take hold within a group, but someone needs to be bold and vulnerable enough to kind of put themselves out there to share it. So that's idea number one. The second one is to develop a vision, and this is related a bit to your why, but rather than those fundamental underpinnings of what you care about, this is your view of the future. So a vision, a lot of people, I talked about Elon Musk earlier, and again, yeah, he's visionary, but it seems kind of out there, but it doesn't have to be. All a vision is your mental model, your picture of the future if you're successful at doing what you are here to do, right? Every organization, every project has a mission. You're here to do something. Well, what does the world look like, and how is it better in the future if you do a good job of accomplishing that mission? And that can be applied to any sphere of life, whether it's home, yourself and your own career, your team, the product or project you're working on. Having a vision, having an idea of what you are aiming for is super important, because that'll help you personally through the rough spots. That'll help you through the challenges and the setbacks. If all you're focused on is figuring out how to write this line of code and you can't figure out where you're missing a curly bracket or whatever, it can be incredibly difficult to get through the day if that's where you're thinking. But if you can pull back and think about, okay, this line of code means something because it's being used as a stepping stone toward this larger vision, you find you can push through that stuff. And then particularly if you're in a position where you lead a team, reminding the team of what the future will look like if and when the team is able to apply their world-class skill, you can really motivate and inspire a team. So on the next slide, I'm suggesting a bit of a challenge. One is to write it down, to come up with a vision for yourself. No matter where you are or where you want to apply it to. Maybe it's your career, maybe it's your whole organization, but to really get concrete about it. And the challenge is to take it from one page where it's kind of descriptive and wordy, and break it down, see if you can cut it down to its essence in a paragraph, and then try to cut it down to its essence in one sentence. And if you can get it down to one sentence and it still makes sense and it feels right, that's what you can share with others. That's what you can share with the team. And that's very, very powerful. The other challenge is to, similar to the This Is Why poster that I put up earlier, develop a vision board that encapsulates that vision. What does that future look like? And I've seen a lot of people do like vision boards that are kind of collages almost. Again, the visual element of that is very, very powerful. Next thing I want to talk about is sharpening the saw, which is the second Stephen Covey turn of phrase that we're invoking here today. By sharpening the saw, really what I'm talking about is keeping your skills sharp, both your technical skills, leadership and business skills. No matter what it is that you do, maintaining your expertise and building on your expertise is a great way to show leadership in an engineering sphere. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Reading books and journal articles, attending conferences, joining societies. There's lots you can do. But the best thing you can do once you have that knowledge is to share it for the benefit of the team. Being a great engineer and being a great leader are two different. These are two different jobs. These are two different skill sets. But by being a great engineer, that's a lever that you can use to bring leadership to a technical team. And again, if your goal is to be a servant to the team, if it's to really serve the needs of the team and the mission, by sharing your knowledge strategically to help the team, you can lead. And this isn't about being the smartest person in the room and beating people over the head about how you're right and they're not. This is about being of service to the team. And I love this quote from Harry Truman that really encapsulates all this for me. Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. True leaders are constantly perfecting their craft and investing in their own development. The next thing that I want to challenge you to do is to connect with your team. And I guess what I mean by this, leading requires that you build trust with people. Okay, and people won't trust you if they don't like you or at least respect you. Okay, it's hard. I sat here early this morning trying to think of someone I trusted that I didn't ultimately like or respect, and I couldn't come up with anyone. You need that personal relationship. You don't need to be friends with everybody, but you do need some sort of basic likability or relationship or respect. And you can't have that until you know someone. So step one is to build an actual relationship with the people on your team. And like I say, you don't have to be buddy-buddy with everyone, but you do have to care for them as individuals. And there's lots of different ways of doing this. You know, as a leader, if you have one-on-ones with your team, which you should as a leader, it doesn't have to be all business. You know, you should challenge yourself to get to know the people you're leading and what the names of their kids and significant others are, what they're into outside of the office. And then there's lots you can do socially too, whether it's rec clubs or game nights or office contests. There's a ton you can do to interact socially with people to get to know them and build that relationship. I remember one time there was a guy that was on a training course with me, and frankly, he rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, and I didn't really know him, but there was just something about him. And anyway, in this, it was actually a leadership course we were taking. And my thought was, I can't believe this guy's on leadership training. He's no leader. Anyway, we had an opportunity to share something about ourselves that we didn't think other people knew. And this guy that I didn't like very much shared that he was a drummer and talked about, you know, his drum kit, and kind of, I was like, I'm a drummer. That's so cool. So all of a sudden we had this thing in common, and I was legitimately curious to learn more. Well, turns out he's a wonderful guy, and I don't know where this preconceived notion came from on my part, but the thing of it was a story I'd created in my head that wasn't true, and all it took was a little nudge, a little nugget of we've got something in common to break down that barrier and facilitate a conversation. Now, I wouldn't say we're friends, but I do basically like and respect this person. He's a knowledgeable professional. I trust him and his judgment. Now, one thing I'll share before we move on, I do kind of emphasize the importance of social interactions and getting to know your teammates and your people as people. It's important to be inclusive in this kind of thing. Not everyone loves sports. Not everyone drinks alcohol. Not everyone likes going to the movies. So if you do have social events, just be sure to, you know, solicit feedback and ideas. Be sure to change it up. If you've got a Friday night happy hour, that's great for the people who like that kind of thing, but not everyone will. Maybe some of your colleagues are caring for kids at the end of the day or caring for their elderly parents. I say all that to say it's important to change things up, right? It's easy to convince yourself that, yeah, I know all the other people on my team and we do all this stuff together. Well, maybe not. Just be careful about that. Next thing I wanted to share is the value of having a mentor or a coach. And Jeff and I did a webinar a little while ago on the importance of mentorship. The take-home message here is simple. With a mentor or a coach, you've got someone there who's knowledgeable, who can hold up a mirror for you, who can help you understand yourself. In the case of a mentor, you can gather lessons learned. You can understand the best path to getting to where you are, to where you want to be, because the mentor has been there. They've put the car in the ditch, so to speak, 1,000 times on the way to where they are. They can help you understand the path to success. Helps you grow knowledge, often helps you build relationships with others in the organization, particularly through mentors who are internal. And even a coach who might not be knowledgeable in your particular domain or your particular field, Coaches are trained to help you through self-discovery and help keep you accountable and help you set goals. And that's really, really motivating. That can help a lot. And particularly if you want to develop yourself as a leader, having an objective third party whom with you can discuss issues or challenges or problems and help you work through that can fast track you on the path to becoming an even better leader. And the final thing that I wanted to share is you shouldn't overlook the opportunities you have to learn to lead by leading. There are countless organizations in every corner of the globe who are desperate for people to step in and step up. Now, obviously, there's almost always opportunities at work, whether it's new projects or initiatives, particularly initiatives that other people don't want to do. That's a really good opportunity to step in and raise your hand. But if you don't feel like work is an appropriate place for you right now for whatever reason, there are organizations in your community. There are volunteer organizations. If there are local schools in your area or you have kids, you can almost always volunteer there. There's faith-based organizations, professional engineering chapters. The list goes on. Honestly, if you were to pick up a phone now and make one or two calls, you could have a role in some executive committee or working group or something where you can ply your wares and really make an attempt at being the leader you want to be in a little bit of a sandbox. Now, that's not to say that these organizations don't matter and you shouldn't give it your all and you should just experiment wildly. That's not what I'm saying. So much as there are opportunities right now where the risk is relatively low compared to trying something out in your current role. So go out, get a leadership role. It's the best way to learn to lead.
Yeah, and many of those organizations are hungry for anyone who's willing to help, and so opportunities to give back and learn skills along the way. So I know we're a few minutes over kind of the time we told you we'd be here. Hopefully you've enjoyed the content. We're just going to wrap things up and kind of put it all together. We talked about, the definitions of leadership, what that looks like, whether or not you directly manage others right now. We talked about this model of servant leadership, why that's important and one effective model and way to look at it. How letting go can actually be one of the key elements to building teams and building the people that you work with. And then Pat just shared those 6 strategies, and hopefully there are some that you are able to take away here for developing your leadership skills no matter where you're at in your career. And I know some of the people here early in their careers, mid-career, and experienced leaders who are here on this call. So we gave you that invitation at the very beginning to what's going to be your takeaway? What do you want to learn here? And so we just want to ask you this question as we finish things up. What was your biggest takeaway? What are you going to do differently because of what we talked about today? So again, do the quick chat thing, throw it in the chat, and then wait to give us your answer. But we do want to see, what are you actually going to do differently? What did you learn, or what's something that piqued your interest or your intellectual curiosity that you're going to go explore further because of what we talked about today? So if you can throw that in the chat, and then we'll do a countdown in 3, 2, 1. Love to hear what you say. Refining the vision, developing and sharing a vision. Wow, that was a
Yeah.
one. Yeah. Servant leadership, learning, servant leader, letting go. A lot of different pieces here. Okay. Okay, cool. I'm glad that a lot of the things we shared here were helpful for you.
Yeah, that's great. It looks like between letting go, servant leadership, the vision, like that people grabbed something from each of the different sections of the talk. So that's good. That's great.
Yeah, that's excellent. And so again, we invite you to not just have these ideas, but then identify at least one thing. What are you going to do differently because of that? If developing and sharing a vision, okay, are you going to go take that action and develop that or share some of these things that are important to you with someone else. Take that action here in the next few days, before the craziness of life comes upon you. Make a plan to do that right now, even. Where to go from here? As promised, we have a few resources for you. Pat's going to do us a favor and throw some of these things in the chat. I put together a 90-day plan, especially for new technical leaders, a way to kind of make that transition from individual contributor to manager. But there are a lot of principles there that even experienced leaders could use, or even if you're not a leader yet, and think about what that transition will look like. And there's kind of a learning piece and a workbook piece there for you. Pat has a great Leadership 101 ebook that he's created to becoming an engineering leader at any stage. And then we'd love if any of you are not already connected to us, to connect with us on LinkedIn or at our websites. For me, morethan-engineering.com, Pat, engineeringandleadership.com, with the continued work that we do, and stay engaged there with other events and other things that are going on. And if there's any way that you feel like one or both of us could help you, your organization, in career leadership development, team development, we would love to have a conversation and talk to you about that. So with that, thanks so much for being here. And even though we're a few minutes late, like we said, we're happy to stay here for any questions that anyone has, to kind of personalize some of the things we talked about and have some conversations here. But if you need to go, we understand, and we just want to thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And I'm going to say, really appreciate the level of engagement, the activity in the chat, the questions. Fantastic. Really, it really helps Jeff and I a lot, frankly, in understanding where you're at, what what's working, what's not, and no, it's just great. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I did.
Oh, go ahead, Suresh.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to thank both of you, right? So this is an area which I do believe a lot of us, especially coming on the engineering side, require help. I mean, to be honest, right? Especially the letting go piece was very helpful. And it's like a very common theme. It's when you're good at something, you don't want to let go, right? You're good. And you see that, you might think that somebody else is doing a substandard work, even though they are senior enough to take up. But some of those pieces are definitely very helpful, Jeff and Pat. Thank you for.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Suresh. And Suresh is someone who I've gotten to know well over the last couple months or so, and is a leader that I admire for his desire to lead and really take that servant leadership and build his teams. And I really appreciate you being here tonight, Suresh.
Thank you.
Any questions from anyone tonight? As we applied, like we said earlier, we didn't get to specifically applying to negotiations or promotions and things like that. So if there are questions you have around those things or other ways to apply some of the ideas, love to talk about.
Yeah, maybe some topics for future webinars. There's no end to this stuff you could talk about there for sure.
Absolutely.
I have a question. Might not be for this one, maybe it is for a future webinar, but I'm recently transitioning away from leadership only in my engineering department, but throughout the company. So any tips in terms of leading or exerting influence without authority, so to speak, of dealing with colleagues, or like trying to lead a project, dealing with colleagues that are across the org chart rather than below the org chart?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great one. And nice to see you again, by the way. I feel like it's been a very, very long time. I think we both had more hair back then.
We did.
So I guess one thing that I would lean on and have leaned on in the past is drawing on that common vision, that common goal, right? Particularly when other people are parallel with you, if you find there's conflict, right? That's one thing that, let's say if it's a project, there should be pretty clearly defined measures of success of the project. There's a deliverable, there's an outcome, there's something. And drawing people toward that and saying, okay, we disagree here. Can we at least agree on ultimately what we're trying to achieve? And everyone should nod. It's like, okay, so what are the options on the table? And then also reminding people that every option has its pros and cons, right? There's no perfect solution in the work we do. The problems are so complex that there will be problems with everything. So acknowledging that, and in the case of someone pointing out, something wrong with your idea, like saying, okay, great, that's a risk. Let's find a way of dealing with that risk. Don't dismiss it and say it's not a big deal. It's like, no, I respect you and I respect your opinion, and here's what we're going to do about it. And then be willing to do the opposite, is say, okay, that presents a risk to my org, but we can't win every time, right? And if you're ultimately driving toward that common vision, then in the long run, yeah, there'll be bumps for sure. But Stefan, I hope that's like, I hope I'm getting your.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that drawing on that common goal between members and sorting through that conflict anyhow, just to get to that and reminding of that common goal. So I appreciate that.
I might just add, I like the word that you used there, is influence. Like that word of influence is something that doesn't need that title to be have, but it is something that's earned over time as that trust builds and that collaborative working relationship. And just to connect, another way of looking at some of the things that Pat was even saying is a push versus pull idea, right? So sometimes we're trying to push what we want on other teams because this is something like we know we're right, and that's giving up some of that ego. But as Pat was talking about, helping identify the common goal, or who are we serving and why are we doing this, and using that as this anchor that's sort of pulling people along towards the thing that helps us. And I just find that a lot of times that is a lot more effective. I like going back to some of those classic physics laws, like for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. If we push, people often push back. If we pull, that almost invites them to come along and be open to those things in a little bit of a different way.
If I can offer one more thing, sorry, Jeff, I agree with that completely. That was really, really good. There's one of my favorite business authors is a guy named Jim Collins, and one of his axioms is shoot bullets, then cannonballs. Yeah. And it's brilliant, right? You do little experiments to see what works, and then you find what works, then invest. If you can frame conflicts around, well, okay, let's just choose an experiment to see, not to see who's right. It's not about who's right, but to explore what's the best decision here. Can we do a low cost, low risk version of what someone is proposing? Right? To see if we can make something work, learn lessons from it, and then go again. And if you frame things as experiments as opposed to, damn it, this is the decision and I'm right, and you've got to deal with it, you're going to get a lot more collaboration, right?
If I can add, pointers to all, Stephen, I think it goes back to the trust thing, right? It's all about trust. Like and it will never be about what you know or what he or she knows, right? It is all about making sure that the trust piece is there, right? And trust is not built in a day. It's done over the period of time. And you may fail immediately in the first few times, but you want to stick to that. You want to stick to that. And then sometimes, like Pat was saying, just saying what you said, I would love to do more investigation into that, or I want to know more about what you're saying. Telling them, hey, you may have a point, but can you please explain to me more? Would really start that kind of a trust conversation, right? Yeah. Once you give them that feeling that, hey, you are willing to listen, you are giving to respect what they are saying, independent of that, it's all about giving that feeling back to the person, just like how you want him to listen to you, right? But if you are the first person doing that to the other person, then you will automatically get it back. I mean, it's one of the things that will always work. And unfortunately, I've seen many times in all these complex organizations, unless you fix the trust portion and the peer portion, it is going to be very tough for us to succeed.
Great, that's really helpful.
Thanks, Suresh. Salah, you've got a question here. Why don't you share with us?
Yeah, mine is actually more around leaders that are above you in an organization, which you may feel that are not performing their leadership tasks in a positive manner, or they may be, and I'm talking about maybe perhaps my perception of that leader, but I do sense a commonality in perception among a few others of my colleagues, where a person with the power of the position exerts leadership in a negative fashion. And my question is more around how you manage such leadership, especially when power is involved.
Yeah, it's a great question, and sadly, that happens more often than we would like it to, which is part of the reason why Pat and I are on a mission to help grow better engineering leaders, right? But I'll just share a few thoughts, and then and these are sensitive situations, and we can think about, and separate. Do we disagree with the direction, or the business or strategic decisions? And that's one thing. Like, it may, we may have disagreements there, but there's other angles. Like, are we seeing that these people are actually being destructive to other people on the team? And that becomes other situations where we might need to escalate or ask for support from other people. And it's not to say that we should probably staging a coup isn't a good idea, most likely. But there, in some cases, if we feel like this is being destructive to us and others and the team's success, then, and certainly I would always say, see if you can address as personally as possible with that leader, and tell them the truth about what you're seeing and what you're hearing. And that gives them that opportunity to make some adjustments. And yes, you need to be sensitive with that and how you go about that, because a person like that may get pretty quickly on the defensive, and so you need to think about how you're going to construct that. But you do need to share the truth with them. If they're not able to make those adjustments, then you may need to get some advice or support from others who might have influence in this situation, and see how you can go about doing that, if there are appropriate channels in your company to go about that. Anyway, Pat, any thoughts from you?
I mean, the first one is that by and large, people quit their bosses, not their jobs. Yeah. That's a pretty well researched phenomenon. Is that a lot of people leave jobs that they love because they just can't work under their particular boss. And years ago, I was in that situation, and I left a role, not because the role wasn't great, but because my boss was a tyrant, right? One of the tools that I came across that might help here is a book called Crucial Conversations, which is a very powerful framework for framing conversations where you expect the other person to be taking an opposing side. Yeah. Like, hey boss, you don't know what you're doing, right? You would never approach them like that. But yeah, a very, very, very highly recommended book is Crucial Conversations. But in a nutshell, the way you approach a conversation like that is you sit with the person, you say something like, I've observed this concrete thing. Okay. This is, and this isn't, I didn't see you being a jerk. This is, I heard you raise your voice with so and so. All right, that's an observable fact. The more concrete, the better. Mm-hmm. Then you posit a story. You say, I see that, and what it looks like to me, what I think is going on is that, this particular person is being given, unfair treatment. But there must be some other explanation. I know that, you want the best for the team. So help me understand. And that's the punchline. That's where it transitions, is help me understand why what the story I'm telling myself about what I concretely observed is not right. Right. And then the floor is turned over. And then the person you are confronting, frankly, has the opportunity to explain what was going on, or say, gosh, I had no idea that I came across that way. I had no idea that anyone would have thought that I was being mean or rude or whatever. Of course, I don't want to be mean or rude. I want the best for the team. And if you frame it that way, and you frame it from the perspective that people genuinely want to do a good job, people genuinely want to treat others with respect, we just fall short sometimes, then you can have that conversation and have it be productive. And I've done that with managers in the past, is, with behavior toward me, toward my colleagues, and you find it's very powerful. And that's the kind of thing, if you want to practice with someone, that's the kind of thing Jeff or I could help with, or a colleague. You sit down your buddy or your spouse and say, okay, here's how I want to approach this conversation. Let me practice. It does help.
Yeah. So just the principles that Pat was sharing, like focus on facts, those observable facts, rather than just your interpretations of what happened, and then get curious rather than accusatory around what you're sharing with them, and more likely to be success. It doesn't mean it's always going to go great. It just means you're more likely to have an opportunity for a constructive conversation. Yeah, but great question, and very sensitive topic, but relevant for a lot of people. So thanks for bringing that up.
And to add light to a very sensitive topic, if you want to try it or practice it with your kids.
Yeah,
that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
I was just thinking that some of the greatest books that I've read on how to have tough conversations are parenting books.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the ways to help children move through stuff. As adults, we're just big children, and we respond in many of the same ways. So great stuff there, Rob.
I just want to add one more thing, right? It's very important, and you are going to have a crucial conversation like this with anyone, your peer or your boss. You be very self-aware, right? Not self-righteous, right? Be self-aware of, there could be things that you might have done wrong, which you want to make sure that you can clarify that to the same person, like in case, right? See, all of us may be in a place right now that we can quit the job and move on, right? But it doesn't help if, let's say, it's also not giving you that ability to self-introspect a little bit, right? Because once you do that, and then you are able to say that, hey, I have done everything in my power to do the right thing. Plus, this is a pattern of misconduct from this leader. Yeah, sure, get out of that place, right? But do that introspection first. It's very important.
Very good. Very good. And that's another reason why focusing on those facts rather than some of those interpretation of the facts is an important but a difficult thing to do, because we're always layering on our own mindsets and beliefs and experiences and those strong feelings about those situations.
That's an important skill to develop, is when you see something and you react a certain way, to realize that you are only telling yourself one story of a million possible stories to explain the few observable facts that you've made is very eye-opening. And Rob mentioned it. This is an important reminder with kids or a spouse or at work or anywhere, is when you catch your blood boiling, remind yourself that there's almost always more to the story. And your mind is, we're all storytellers, right?
Mhm.
That's an important skill to be able to have to fill in the gaps. The problem is we often do it in a way that leans more into the preservation of self, like caveman engineer, right? Is you see something and you worry about the worst case scenario, because that for hundreds of thousands of years has kept us alive. We don't need that anymore. It's a maladaptive in the workplace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Fun discussions. Any other questions tonight? I can't believe Nora's still here, after 3 a.m. in Lebanon. It's awesome. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we just want to thank you once again for being here and for your engagement and your thoughtful questions and discussions, supporting us. Again, if we can help you, reach out. We'll be sending the recording here in the coming days, a little bit of follow-up, but please let us know if we can help you, your teams, your organizations in any way. We'd love to engage and have a conversation about that. So with that, we wish you all a fabulous evening and a wonderful rest of your week, and keep working on becoming great leaders. Thanks so much.
Yeah, we'll see you guys around for the next one.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah, have a great night, everyone, or great morning.
Thanks.